Welcome back to Rupture, the world of Beskistan. I'm Wendy Lurrie, and today's episode is about who do you trust after a TBI? After my brain injury, I couldn't trust myself at all. My brain was scrambled. My thoughts were muddled. I couldn't tell the difference between what was real, what was important, what was urgent, and what was noise. And the balance in the beginning looked something like this. I trusted myself this much. I trusted Reddit this much. And all of the rest of the trust went to doctors and tests and protocols. This episode is about how that balance shifted over time. Not because medicine failed, not because I gave up, but because agency slowly returned. Today's episode is a follow-up to the episode that kicked off this entire podcast series, my conversations with Kim Lauersdorf. And in today's episode, Kim and I talk about advice overload, treatments that fail to live up to the hope, and the moment when recovery shifts from looking for the right fix to learning to live inside what's real. This is not advice. This is lived experience. This is about learning how to learn how to decide again. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with my forever friend and strategy partner, Kim Lauersdorf. The topic of today's conversation is who do you trust after a TBI? Hello, Kim.
Good morning, Wendy. Thanks for having me back for part 2 here, where we're going to dig into a little bit more of I'm going to say science and arts.
Okay.
We're going to talk about treatments and therapies and what you really started to do once you got the diagnosis and were on the journey. So
Okay.
let's talk about, and I'm just going to say it up front because we're going to talk about it a lot. This is about trust.
Yeah.
Right? This
it
is
is.
about who do you trust? Do you trust yourself? It is about trust, and we're going to keep coming back to it. So I want to just start from the beginning. When you had the injury and you're starting to get the diagnosis and you're starting to navigate treatments, what was it like in your cognitive experience? What was it like in your heart experience of trust? What was this experience like?
So the first part was total denial. Like as soon as it happened, it was like, I was fine. And it took a few days until I had the CT scan, which was fine. But to realize that I wasn't fine, everything was a mess. Like I literally could not think clearly. My brain felt scrambled. And it also felt like it was, I don't know, numb is the right word, but it just felt like parts of my brain that normally are just flowing and rocking and rolling were just frozen. It was just like they were paralyzed. And I couldn't think straight. I mean, I needed to have someone tell me, I needed to have a doctor tell me, go to the ER, get a CT scan. And I was like, okay, I will do what you say. I don't really understand it, but someone needs to tell me what to do.
Which, knowing you, is not typically your posture, right? You are your own health advocate. You've worked in the healthcare industry and understand far more of the science and the discipline than the average bear. And you've always been, the tip of the spear, I would say, of your own care. And now you're in the backseat looking for everything. Did you feel like doctors had the answers? Did you feel like the answers were there, you just couldn't access them? What was that like?
That's a great question. I felt like I felt this way, that medicine had the answers because medicine must have the answers because I didn't have them. This wasn't something I was going to be able to fix. A few days of the day-long headache every day made me realize that nothing I was doing was going to fix that. And it didn't occur to me for a second at that time that the doctors wouldn't have the answers. I just assumed there was a ton of stuff out there. Answers, resources, medications, treatments. I just assumed it was all there. So with it was like, here,
So
you guys know what to do.
what was there? though. So when you start looking, right, and I know you're a researcher, right? I know, you want to find the studies and you want to find the data and you want to find the experiences. Like when you started this, what was there?
Well, I didn't look that much when I first started because right away, screen time was hard. And even though I would later find out that this was not the right guidance, the sense I got from the little I was reading was cognitive rest, minimal screen time. All that guidance changed 10 or 15 years ago, when the science around it was better understood, but it didn't filter down to all of the doctors, not even all the neurologists, let alone primary care. And I think what I was also picking up in just what I was seeing was avoid screens and cognitive rest makes intuitive sense. Even if the science isn't there, the idea of resting your brain makes intuitive sense. So, honestly, I went on Reddit. I went on Reddit, and because Reddit was sort of where you go when you can't get a question answered any other way. And I would look at it a little bit at a time, but it was somewhere to go, and all I was really finding there in the beginning were other people who were looking for answers.
When I'm thinking about trust again and thinking about the who, right? The who in this, right? Like you didn't really have models of TBIs in your life to call a bunch of friends. Family is there, but they're not the experts in any of this. And so online community makes sense. But what you're saying is when you went to that community, it was people in the same position a lot more.
It was a lot of that. I mean, as I would get deeper into it, and as I could tolerate more or just force myself to tolerate more, I started getting more information, but I saw and I still to this day, because I'm active on the TBI subreddit. I mean, people will show up and say, "Here are my symptoms, diagnose me. What do I have?" I mean, people are going there because they don't have access to a neurologist, which is true for a lot of people in this country, or they don't even have access to primary care who might have any expertise. So it's scary and it's weird because it's an isolating, alienating condition to have. We've talked about this because of the unrelatability. But then when you go on a place like Reddit and you see a ton of other people who are dealing with it, it it gives you a little bit of a sense that you're not really the only one dealing with this. Nobody else may have the answers, but there are other people going through it. But I would say at that point, Reddit and whatever the doctor was saying, which is not, to your point, my natural stance. It's just like trust an institution. You know me, I'm a nonconformist and somewhat rebellious and not a rule follower. But it was like someone must have the answer. But also part of the reason I thought someone must have the answer was I knew concussions were common. I didn't know how common. I knew that they happened to football players who we talk about and care about, and there's concussion protocols and all of this stuff. I knew they happened to the military. It didn't occur to me for a second that the answers weren't there. It was just a matter of I hadn't gotten to the right person to ask the right question, but the answers had to be there.
Yeah, and we're gonna jump into the treatment here in just a
Okay.
minute. But before we leave that, I just wanna like put ourselves in the shoes of the people that are still in this phase, right? And looking for an answer. And so what would be your advice of this early phase? Like what is okay to what should they be looking for? What guideposts should they be looking for? What is okay in this phase?
Evidence-based research. There is a lot of information out there that has no science behind it. And it isn't always easy to find the science behind it. So I would tell people to go to sources you could trust. I mean, I go to the National Health in the UK more than I used to. I used to go to the NIH more. But I would go to Johns Hopkins and Mayo and Cleveland and sources I knew had science behind them and that were trustworthy. I would say make sure the sources that you trust are trustworthy because there's a lot of bad information out there. And a lot of just sort of snake oil too. Which don't let me forget about the migraine cap when we get to that.
Migraine cap.
Migraine cap, yes, the
Make
migraine cap.
notes. Uh when you So that's the science side of it, right? The data. And so while I'm hearing that, I'm also thinking about the heart side of it a little bit and the being seen side of it. And, we're marketers, so storytellers in nature. What role did stories play in this? Were they reassuring? There are people like me. Were they disconcerting because people are lost too? What role
Yeah,
did the
the
story
answer is yes. It's yes. So, like, and I'll still see stories of people, like, people will show up and say, "I cured my TBI in 6 months." And now when I look at that and then I read the posts and it's like, well, I took these 57 supplements, all of which are unproven and haven't really been regulated. Now I look at those and I'm like, hmm. But at the time it was like, oh, people are, I couldn't read deeply, right? I couldn't really follow all this. It was like, oh, people are getting cured. People are getting over this. A- And the doctors gave me lots of reasons to think there were things that could be done.
Yes, we're
So in terms of that trust question, like I trusted myself, maybe 10%. I trusted medicine, maybe 80%, and the extra 10% would be like for the online communities of Reddit.
okay. Okay. So we've got 80%. We've got the Pareto rule in function for medicine at
Right.
this point. Okay, so let's start talking about treatments and therapies. And as we jump into this, I want to just define this language a little bit because I think we'll use it and I think others can, grab onto different pieces of it. Treatment is really considered like the umbrella phase of it's you're going to have a treatment plan,
Right.
right? And within that, the goals of treatment is really heal, fix,
Yeah. Yeah.
eradicate,
Make it go away. Do a
right?
service pro like it never happened. That's what you're hoping for is that that's the treatment.
Right? Treatment is done. We did it.
We did it.
Congratulations.
Done. We can move on.
Where therapy is considered clinically a sleeve in the treatment, right? It is a part of your treatment plan, and it's a far more approach to healing, coping, dealing with, giving skills so that you can live with this. Right? It's
Yes.
not eradicating this.
Right. Right.
Okay. So I just wanted to align on those kind of treatment therapy
Yep. And
definitions.
the other key differentiator is that like the treatments are things that you either take or are done to you. The therapies are the work that you have to do.
Okay. That's another good delineation there. So let's talk about
Treatments.
treatments. I think you coined this the abundance phase.
Yes,
Because
this
there
is
was
the
no
abundant phase.
lack of options here.
No, and it felt like the runway was infinite.
All
It
right.
was like, we're gonna do this, and if that doesn't work, we're gonna do this. So it started with, I think the first thing that was done to me, and a lot of these take the form of injections, because when you have a head injury, the first thing you want are people like sticking needles in you, but that's the form a lot of these take. So the first thing that my neurologist did were occipital nerve blocks. So those are nerve blocks that they go back here, and they're very helpful with like long standing, like intractable headaches. They sort of cover this one area. And I actually got some relief from the first batch. The first round of those, they did seem to help a little bit. Then we did a second round of those. They did nothing. And at the time, I was still seeing two neurologists. I had the concussion neurologist who I was newly seeing because I was able to get access to her. But I had my headache neurologist who I'd been seeing for years for migraine. And he was the one who actually sent me to the ER because I didn't have a concussion neurologist yet. So headache neuro said, okay, if occipital nerve blocks didn't work, which were the ones that the concussion neurologist did, let's try a whole head of nerve blocks. Nerve blocks everywhere, here and here and here and here and here. And I was like, okay, didn't work, incredibly painful. Still on the side, in the category of, in the bucket of injections are Botox. So Botox is approved for migraine. And I had done a few rounds of it for migraine years before, long before I ever had the TBI. And it consists of 3 rounds of between 35 and 40 injections of Botox, like, in the back of your. I kept saying, like, "Can I turn around so you could just, like, touch up a little here?" They're like, "No, no, we don't do that." I'm
Well,
like, "Fine, fine, because this is already so awesome."
you got 30. You could at least give me
I was like,
3,
"Well," and they
right?
had extra. Like, the number was, like, 33 to 35, and they're like, "We can go up to 40." I'm okay, a little nip and tuck. But anyway, so I knew what those Botox shots felt like because I had done them pre-TBI, and pre-TBI, they weren't that bad. When it was just for migraine, they weren't that bad. But I don't know if it was the irritated brain or the pressure, but they were incredibly painful. I made it through 2 rounds of 40 injections each and then couldn't do it again. And the problem is if you stop at the second and then you wanna continue, you have to go back and start it all over again at the first. Like, you have to do all 3 rounds within a specific amount of time, and there was no way I could do it. So that was pretty much the point. Wait, let me include do you wanna include acupuncture under needles?
I mean, I'm yes, I'm just fascinated by the volume of needles and
So there are more needles. So I found this woman. She's amazing, and I would still go to her if I had time. I think she's Ukrainian, but she did Japanese acupuncture, which I didn't know was a thing, but it was very, very gentle, and really, really lovely, and our sessions were, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 hours. They definitely help with the anxiety. I don't know if they help with anything else. And then I don't remember because memory is difficult with a brain injury too, at what point I did this, but I did at least 1 round of traditional Chinese acupuncture. Unfortunately, I was just looking for someone who was in network, so I went to the top one on the list that my insurance company provided, and ended up at a place that I ran screaming from. They didn't wash their hands. The needles were incredibly painful. They left me there alone with needles in my head for a ridiculous amount of time. As soon as they came in and, like, yanked them out, I, like, flew out of there. But yeah, acupuncture and I had a lot of experience with acupuncture, had done it for migraine years before, so I've always been a fan. Didn't really help as much as I wanted it to. But that's kind of the whole, like, needle
yeah.
category.
And I'm just curious about like because you have been a long time migraine sufferer, which is a form of head pain, obviously different than a traumatic brain injury, but it feels like you were already a little bit advanced in this phase versus someone who's coming to this without any sort of migraine treatment and now getting 30 needles in the head. Do you feel like you were kind of prepared for it and still wildly unprepared or more
Yes.
prepared than the average bear?
Well, I think I was more prepared than the average bear because I've been living with migraine. I think I had my first migraine when I was in a college class. I was 17, and became aphasic. Couldn't say a word. I lost all powers of speech, which was really scary. But because I've been living it with so long and I've done so many treatments, I think I was walking into this more experienced and readier. I think it's kind of a shock if you've never had anything like this. And what I see people talking about, and I hear people talking about after the TBI, people say like, "I've never really had headaches before, and now I have migraine." I don't know if they have what we migraineurs would consider a migraine, or if it's just a headache so bad it has to be a migraine, because those are not really the same thing. A migraine is a very specific kind of headache, but I think it's kind of surprising to suddenly have all these people wanting to stick needles in your head if you've never gone through it before.
And then the other question that came to me as you were talking about your Chinese acupuncture visit was if you were in your migraine treatment space, not your TBI, would you have even gotten on the table?
No, no, that was close to the end of when I was starting to say, I don't think chasing treatment is the right path for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I could it didn't sound like something you do.
No, no.
Uh, so when we talk about, like, the injections, is that really about pain management, or were we trying to solve other symptoms too?
No, it was really only about pain because my other symptoms would be dealt with through the therapies, through the working stuff to like work on balance, vision. This was all pain.
Okay, well, then let's talk about some maybe not needles that you did in this treatment phase.
Okay. Well, let me do one that's sort of half on the sort of like on the bubble, which is I was sent to pain management doctors more than once because it's a reasonable thing to do, right? I mean, a doctor sees a pain that they can't cure, they send you to pain management. And the first person that I was referred to was very highly recommended and apparently so famous and popular that the earliest appointment I could get with him was 11 months out.
Okay.
And then they intervened and said this is no, this is really important, and they got me a faster appointment. And I went to see this guy, and he was, he's a pain management guy, and all he wanted to do was work on my neck. And by the way, it's injections too. It's still injections. And I kept saying, "The problem is not in my neck." I know people with TBIs, we just had a panel discussion with other people, one of whom does have it mostly in her neck. But this was not my neck, and I kept saying, like, "Why do you wanna work on my neck?" And it took a while for me to realize they know how to do that, and they're allowed to go up to a certain point. So I left there, I was, like, not super comfortable with the whole thing because it was like it it was like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So it didn't feel like we connected or he understood me. Later on, I would be sent to another pain management guy who I did form a rapport with earlier in the conversation, and we just connected. And when he said he wanted to work on my neck, I was like, "Okay, can we be honest here? do you want to work on my neck because you really think it's going to help, or because it's something you're able to do? And he said, honestly, it's because it's something I'm able to do. And I'm like, it was super nice meeting you and thank you for your time. But I won't be doing a follow up. Tons of respect. So that was sort of like a little bit of going down the rabbit hole of pain management. But I can see how you can get stuck there too, unless you say this is not something that's going to work for me.
Right, because it's a prevailing symptom, right? And treatment is trying to get rid of the symptom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are the things that help contribute to my feeling of at a certain point, I wasn't ready yet, but I'm going to need to take agency back and and start saying no to things. Because otherwise you could just chase the stuff all the time. I could have just gone pain management guy to pain management guy to pain management guy.
I'm thinking about so often when we feel something, it is the same thing, right? It's duality. And so, like, when you had treatments that were failing, were you, I'm sure, disappointment, but was that also your agency trying to poke through a little bit too?
I think in the beginning it was disappointment because in the beginning I was like, remember, I'm only 10%, only 10% of the trust is in me. But as time went on, each one of those things brought me closer. And I was thinking about this question and I realized it took me quite a long time to get to the point of realizing I treatments aren't going to work and I need the ministry of let's solve the problem in a different way. Because solving the problem in that way wasn't working and I needed to find a different way.
So before we get psychedelic,
Yes.
is this a good place for the migraine cap? Is this
Well, yeah, so let's mention the migraine cap. So I don't remember who recommended this thing to me, but someone was like, you have to try this. So, I go on Amazon and it's a migraine cap.
I'm sorry,
And
I am just it's seeing the, like, construction hat and the beer tubes.
that would have been a lot better than what it actually was. So what it
Okay,
actually
okay, I'm
is,
ready.
so think of a fabric that's like speaking of the Olympics, like as tight as an Olympic swimmer's cap. Okay. It's that kind of fabric. And it has these little pockets. It's pockets. So first you put it on, and as soon as I put it on, I'm not comfortable because it's really tight and it's pressing. And then you're supposed to put ice cubes. I'm sorry, you're supposed to put ice cubes into the little pockets.
I can see you
And
taking this seriously.
I will, 2 years out, I can look at it and laugh. And I don't remember if I did it or Nick did it, but like we put them in, and as soon as like one of them touched my head, I was like, "Get this thing the fuck off of my head!" It was so awful. It was so unpleasant. I honestly, as someone with migraine, can't imagine that I would have liked it anymore during a migraine. But it was. I didn't last 5 seconds. It was completely intolerable. So, fi on the migraine cap.
So not for you, not
Not
for
for
you.
me. Not for me.
One-star review.
Oh, that was bad. That was like $15 I'll never see again, but it was okay. It
It's
was
alright,
okay.
you got
Yeah, that's
$15.
part of the trial and error.
It's a test well spent. Okay, let's get psychedelic.
Psychedelic. Okay, so I was thinking about I was trying to remember how I got to this in the first place, and like so much else that happened relatively early on in this process, my mind is a blank. But somehow I got to the idea of ketamine, but not just going to one of these. They're called drip clinics where you can just like sort of go in and like get I wanted to go to someplace that was reputable and all this stuff. So I found this very reputable, very fancy facility that did ketamine, and I think I went, and it was very expensive, and none of it's covered by insurance. I think insurance approves it for certain kinds of mental illnesses like PTSD, but definitely wasn't approved for this. And the lights were soft, and the furniture, everything was zen, and there were books in every room by great thinkers, and the staff, like everybody couldn't have been nicer. And for 6 weeks I went, and in the beginning, they were giving me low dosages of this, and they were going by weight. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But my drug threshold is actually, and you know why? Everyone who knows me knows why. My drug threshold is very, very high. I'm like, you're going to need to keep jacking it up. So it took like a session or two for them to like jack it up. And they would come in, and it was all very lovely. But when I think about it now, I think every single thing I thought I saw in they call them journeys. They're not trips, they're journeys, was self-generated. I don't think the ketamine caused me to see anything. I think it was just complete darkness. And I was fooling myself. And at like, $3,000 for 6 sessions, it's like, I'm gonna manufacture what I need to, but I got nothing from it. And I certainly didn't get any relief, but I didn't even get the experience, which was kind of a drag. It was kind of a drag.
Well, and we've talked about this a little bit of, when you're seeking treatment, when you're seeking therapies, there's a level of readiness you have to have for it. And there's a level of capacity and resource. And when I listen to that, what I hear a little bit is I wanted to be in control. Right.
I
I
did.
wanted to think my thoughts.
And see if I can make pictures out of them.
Right. I want to be, and I'm not sure that's exactly how that experience is designed
I
to
think it
go.
is. I don't think it is. It was disappointing. I mean, I hoped that it would work, but I hoped, look, that if it didn't work, at least I'd get a cool trip out of it.
I mean, there's always try again, always try again.
Well, they keep emailing me with special offers, so
Right.
it's tempting, but I'm gonna say no. But the other psychedelic I tried were mushrooms, and those were not prescribed. I didn't go to any fancy clinic, just a friend provided me with mushrooms and told us because Nick did it with me, told us the dose to start with. We both did it, felt nothing. He felt nauseated from it, so it was having some effect on him, just not the one he wanted. I felt nothing. Next time I saw this guy, I'm like, "Didn't work." He said, "Double it." I'm like, "Okay." We tried it again. Nothing. Triple it. When we got to the point of, like, quadruple it, I'm like, "I think I'm done here. I don't think this is going to help."
The Costco size batch of
Yeah,
mushrooms.
exactly,
It's
and
too much.
they're dried, they're weird, and then they, like, steep them like tea, and again, it should work. It didn't, like, no effect at all, and then it was like, "I think I'm done with the psychedelics." The next thing I actually wanted to try was a shaman. We just didn't get that far.
I mean, there's still time, you
There
know.
is still time, but I gave up on treatment, right? So, like, I said I'm gonna solve the problem in a different way. But
Okay,
that was
so
part of my sort of my sort of loopy tree of trying was the psychedelics, the very non-traditional.
well, and I do wanna clarify here, we are not the medical professionals in
No,
this
not at all.
conversation,
No, 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 no.
and things may work for people, and there is data, and there is science, so, that is
I'm only speaking about my own experience and what worked for me, which was nothing. But no, I think if people can benefit from these things, they absolutely should, and there are a lot of people who can benefit. I mean, the nerve blocks help a lot of people. The Botox helps people. The ketamine I can't speak to, but because I don't know how much data there is, but on the other things, there is data and they are helpful. They just didn't help me.
yeah, and it is interesting, I think just from a personal perspective, right, there are going on a trip like that sounds terrifying to my system, right? It's
Mhm.
terrifying to not be like that. That's a me thing.
Right.
Right? There could be a use for that, and it could be so that is where, I think your partnership with the medical and your doctors really is helps with all of that.
And the doctors were supportive. They were always like, "Try anything." I mean, it was never like, "Oh, we've heard like there are bad impacts of that." It was like, "No, no, anything you can find and try. If it works, great."
Which is fascinating because in a more, I'll say, I'm gonna say traditional, I'm not sure that's the right word, but a more traditional diagnosis or treatment, some docs can get territorial, right? They can be like, "Well, that's not gonna work for you."
Right.
But it is interesting to hear how open, maybe even desperate.
Well, I think it's a combo. I think like my neurologist is first of all very open, but also recognize that the treatment lane was narrowing. Like that endless runway that I mentioned when it was first starting, and it's like, oh, and here, that was shrinking, and I could start to see the end of it. And she was like, as long as you do it, like with under supervision or at a reputable place or whatever it was, very open to it. But I think part of it is the desperation, but part of it is also the just like openness to anything because some things, not everything will work for everyone. And everyone goes through trial and error. Like, I have not come across any one single story of anyone finding the first treatment right away that solves this problem. This is a trial and error process, mostly error, heavy
Well
on the error.
so talk about that a little bit of these things start to not work. As you say, the path starts to not to narrow. You start to fail at these things, right? So what's happening as you start out in a pasture of hope and possibility and promise, and now it's getting darker and narrower and more self-flagellation or more disappointment in the systems? Like, what is it starting to feel like?
So it happened in phases, right? So I would say year 1 was all about the treatments and the abundance, because in the first year, there was abundance. Plus the just trying to just get my brain to work and hold on to my job and not blow up my entire life. I mean, year 1 was just that. Year 2 was when I started to really write. And I wasn't writing Best Guess the Sound yet. I was still writing Concussed CMO. But it was when I was starting to see the runway shorten and the abundance dissipate. And it was honestly, the second year was probably the darkest year for me. It was filled with I was just sad, which is not my normal state. I've never had depression except when I have unfortunately had to take drugs like Lyrica, which they put me on at one point, and they gave me suicidal ideations. So we stopped taking that. But the second year was dark, and I didn't feel like they were I mean, I wasn't ready to say no to all treatment, but I was also believing less and less that there were treatments available that were even going to work. And that was we talked about this last time. That was probably the year I was doing more pushing people away and feeling abandoned, because it's I mean, the condition is isolating, right? The condition of a TBI is isolating. But then people don't wanna hear about they wanna hear about the treatments, but they don't wanna hear about all the treatments that didn't work and there's nothing left. Like, and it becomes that problem of, I don't wanna just give updates on these conversations, and the year was sad and dark. And it wasn't until last year, early last year, when I accidentally landed in Beskistan, that I realized it was time to stop chasing treatment and start solving the problem in a different way. And what made me realize that was the things I was starting to write about, because I was starting to write about a situation which was really a world in which people like me who didn't succeed in all these recovery things could go without being judged and being monitored and being scheduled because we hadn't recovered in a certain timeline. And so I created things like the ministry of updated expectations and the forgettery and the ministry of letting things slide. Um, and the ministry of accommodation, because I found the world didn't really accommodate people like me. And that's when I started to realize there were actually a lot of people like me. And so it was a slope to get here, to get to the point of done with treatments. But that was what gave me my agency back. Once I realized that if I could create a world that offered what people like me needed, because we knew that the real world didn't have it, that let me take back some of the control. That let me shift that 10-10-80, 10-10-80, right, to
We're there, 10-10-80.
10-10-80 to I trust myself 90%. I still trust medicine. There's nothing wrong with medicine. It's just that they ran out of things they could do.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating as I listen to you talk about, like, the writing component of it. It's fascinating what we will put on paper before we will think it and digest it, and obviously it came from us, but you start to look back on your writing and you're like, "Wow, I was there." Right? It starts to give you this kind of guidepost of where you were, even if you didn't feel like, you had agency when you were writing that.
But
There was
it gives you a
something
map.
in
Yeah,
it,
there's a
right?
map.
It starts to come out, and so I think that's, fascinating, and I know some people are intimidated by writing, but I think it's just an encouragement to be in your own space, right, and let yourself create and think.
Well, that's it. It's creating, like, it doesn't have to take the form of writing. I mean, draw, knit, cook, do anything. I mean, first of all, do anything that makes you feel better about yourself. Really, really helps. But find those outlets. And there are people who will always chase treatment, and that's fine. Um, but for me, it was really about not. It became not about chasing treatment, but about how do I live with this? This is not leaving me. So if I'm going to have a life with this, how do I create a life around it? And how do I make sense of it? And maybe, just maybe, how do I create language that gives people who don't have the language the ability to name things? Because that's one of the really tricky parts about this is if you can't name it, it's very hard to acknowledge it even to yourself. I mean, naming has real power. And that's what a lot of the writing became about, but it I certainly didn't write it intending it to end up where it is. I let the project drives me, right? I don't drive it, but it drove me first to this, like, place of acknowledgement and witnessing. I mean, Best Guessistan is about witnessing and saying to other people going through this, "It's okay. You're not okay, and that's fine." But I had to get through it through the writing.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's dive into this therapy pool,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
we
Yes.
we
Yes.
come out of the path narrows on treatment,
Yes.
and this isn't necessarily an or, right? This is not you go down treatment and then you end up in therapy,
No,
right?
these things are happening at the same time.
Right, they're happening at the same time. You're having different experiences than them. You're gaining different things. But what? So one, just open the world of like therapies.
Okay.
What were
Okay.
therapies you were doing?
So there are a lot of therapies that are available. The 2 that I needed the most, and was diagnosed as needing the most because you get evaluated for this stuff, were vision therapy and vestibular, the fancy word for balance, because my balance was completely off. My short-term memory was kind of blown up too, but the most sort of emergent problems were vision, and balance. So, because I was at the NYU Concussion Center, that gave me access to Rust, to the Rust Rehab Institute, which is just, like, the best. So I would eventually do 2 rounds of vision therapy, but I did vision and vestibular roughly at the same time. I also can't there was probably some kind of overlap. Um, Vestibulars, I mean, they're so hard. I mean, I think I went into it thinking like most people do, which is just fix me. Like, I'll just lie back here and just do what you need to do and let me know when it's done, as opposed to, "Oh, this is a working session," because the work is really, really hard. So, vestibular was interesting. Because I mean, it was doing things that are so simple for anybody else. That's when you realize how damaged you are. You don't realize how damaged you are with a TBI until someone asks you to walk down a hallway, look ahead for 10 steps, turn to the right, then look ahead, turn to the left, look ahead. And it's literally nauseating. I thought I was going to vomit every single time because my head would just spin and it was violent. And And then you would see these other people doing the same thing as you were doing, like, in the opposite direction, which was also, like, weird and creepy, but it was physically sickening to do it. I made myself do it. I got through that as quickly as I could. I did not wanna repeat that. What I did decide to do was work on my balance through things like yoga and Pilates, because I felt like I could get what I needed there without this, like it was so jarring. But it did help, like, it got me to a certain point. Though I would say my balance is still not as great as it was before, but and then vision therapy, I did 1 round of it. I had a really good, rehab therapist, and there are all these cute names for exercises. They call them, like, pencil push-ups and things that you're doing. Because I had 2 vision problems that were caused by the TBI. One was, I talked about this with Kellyanne in her episode. One was, convergence insufficiency, which is just how close can you bring your finger to, and I'm not gonna do this now because it's still somewhat of a problem, to your eyes without it going double? Mine used to be out here, now it's, like, here, so that's an improvement, but most people are, like, here. So that was the first problem. The second problem is something called fourth nerve palsy, and that causes double vision. So I was having a lot of different kinds of problems with double vision, and there are a lot of exercises that you do to, like, strengthen. And we did it. I wasn't as great about doing the at-home homework as I might have been, as I was the second time, just because, again, I found it very disorienting and nauseating to do this stuff, and there's a limit to what I could do. I mean, one of the tricks they told me was 20, 20, 20. When you're working on something and it's very focused, every 20 minutes, take 20 seconds and look 20 feet away, which helped. Another thing they taught me is this thing called palming, where you do this, and you literally close out all the light, and you just stay there until, like, your brain calms down. So I had some improvement from the first round, still not as much as I needed because screens were a problem, reading was a problem, all of these things were still an issue. So I did go back for a second round, but this time I committed to doing all the work. And not only did I keep every session, which I think I did the first time too, but I did the work. Every single day, like, I came home and they were toys. They were basically toys that they gave you. And I played with the toys and I did the things. And then I would have to lay down just because I was so nauseated. Uh, And it's the hardest work you can imagine, and it seems like if you have an undamaged brain and you watch someone doing this, you'd be like, "Well, that's not." No, with an undamaged brain, it's not hard. It's brutally hard.
Well, the therapies are not for the undamaged brain.
Correct. For a reason.
So, well, I listen to this, and I don't wanna, I don't wanna misrepresent or over generalize, but I think what is really challenging when it comes to the therapies is I think we're more attuned for the treatment mindset, right? Just fix me. And so I'm thinking about this year I went through some physical therapy for back pain.
Mhm.
It's back pain I've had for 2 decades. Right? It's not a surprise, right? It was an injury. It just got to a point where it's like you got to go on. You got to go one, just get back to homeostasis. But as I was going through the process and paying attention, right? Not just going and letting them do what they're doing and just checking the box, but really paying attention, it became really, really obvious in my own body. My foundation was crap,
Mhm.
right? The
Yeah,
foundation was faulty,
yeah.
and that I needed to not just rebuild something on top of a faulty foundation. I needed to disassemble this
Yes.
and start rebuilding on a new foundation and then doing work on top of that. And then, by the way, to maintain that foundation is maintenance,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm done in 6 weeks. It's like you got to keep doing this to keep that foundation in place. How much was that similar
Yes.
in this injury phase?
Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking that's exactly what it is because when you have a TBI and your brain is shaken in its skull and everything sort of dislodges and then settles back into a new thing, um, you've basically blown up the foundation. There is no foundation anymore.
So you didn't have to bring in the wrecking crew. You
No, no,
that
no. Oh, no, no, the Uber driver was the wrecking crew. The
okay, good.
hatchback was the wrecking crew.
It's its own kind of helpful.
In a way, right? But no, there was no foundation. We had to and that was what the vision therapy was really about, was all basically like creating a new foundation. And I will say, like, it worked to a degree. I can look at screens for longer, though everything is always in dark mode. But to me, one of my personal tragedies in all of this is I have not been able to regain my love of reading for pleasure. It's still not a pleasure.
That
I
does
know.
hurt that
I
part.
know. And it hurts mine, and I hope to get there, but it's still a struggle. And it's just one of the things that it's one of the vestiges of this I think I'm just gonna be living with for a long time. I'll try to make myself do more, but the reading is still hard. But yeah, the foundation was like
Okay, so therapies bring work.
but they addressed the deficits, not the pain, but the
That's where
deficit.
I'm gonna give you the but. But they're building back
Yes, they
mechanism
work.
skills.
Yeah.
They're working for you. You're gaining trust back in yourself. Are
Yep.
they helping in that
Yes,
thing?
definitely. Definitely. Because, again, especially when you're doing it at home and you're doing it on your own, and then you go back to get evaluated, and they evaluate you on pretty, regular cadence, and things actually get better, right? And you're like, "Yes, the therapist helped me, but I was able to do that," which is a big thing for someone to, not just me, but anyone who's been living with this to say after a few years of, "I don't know what's going on," to like, "Actually, I helped make this better," gives you a little bit of your confidence back because like, confidence gets blown up when everything else gets blown up. But yeah, it did feel like some of the agency came back with that.
So we're starting to walk towards the phase where you are now.
Right.
We're sneaking up behind it, which is you're done with treatments. So before we acknowledge that and move kind of forward, what were the things I know we've talked about it, but what were the things that started to make this equation really shift for you? Of I'm gonna take control of this. I'm getting back in the driver's seat.
I don't know that I ever thought about that consciously.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't think I thought about that because the shift happened over time. Um, I mean, I went through this with breast cancer too, when I went through it and I handed all of my agency over and it took a long time for me to say, wait a minute. actually, I'm at least an equal participant in this. Um, it was part of it was time. I mean, I'm not a patient person, I never have been. Part of it is just time.
I mean, that's a little bit of what I was hearing, right? And just listening to it is, yes, you start to build confidence in the therapies. Yes, you start to get some of the skills back and the critical thinking, and you start to feel more in control. But all of that really was time.
It was time, and the sense of, like, throwing good money after bad. Like, and not in a financial way, but just like, why am I going to keep trying these things that are just versions of things I've already tried because there wasn't anything breakthrough? I no longer have any expectation that these things are gonna work. And that's the other thing, right, is your expectations change. Like, the who you trust changes, and another vector of that is how your expectations change. Because in the beginning, you think this is curable and this is fixable. But my expectations changed over time, and so I would say time is the biggest factor. Writing was the secondary factor. Um, I don't know if there was anything else beyond that. It's just my own impatience. Like, I just can't stick with things that are not advancing for that long, right? It's boring, and it's boring, and I was bored by this whole topic at a certain point. Not one more pain guy saying, "Let's work on your neck," because they did offer to send me to get more pain people to work on my
Great.
neck.
We'll have
Still
a
not a
whole
problem.
uh, how do you describe where you are today?
Liberated. I found the process of letting go of the need to chase treatment really freeing, because it allowed me to figure out how to create a life with this in it. I mean, it was always gonna be there, but I could have been in denial for a lot longer. I could have stayed in that dark second-year place for much, much longer, but I don't let myself stay there. Like, I do have a long history of being able to kick back and sort of push away on unpleasantness, even that I'm generating. And it was like, I can't be here. It's not who I am to live in this world of, like, my whole life is nothing but doctor's appointments and treatment options. And, like, I needed to create a life and get back confidence and get back productivity. This is gonna sound overly dramatic, but, like, not that I didn't have things to live for, but to give myself, like, to not to recreate what I had before, because you can't do that, but to at least start on a path to a life that had more interesting things in it. Because I do get bored very easily, and I think that worked in my favor in this case.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm thinking about the other side of the continuum of this about how comforting a life of doctor's appointments can be. Structure, right? It can be built-in structure. You are a move yourself
Yeah.
person. There are plenty of other, people that are move me.
Right.
And especially if you lose capabilities and you lose capacity and you lose these things that, the structure can build in that. So I think and that maybe is time for that people, or maybe that is a world that they're comfortable inhabiting.
Right,
Just
and
different.
but comfort was never the goal, right? For me, at least, comfort's not the point. The
I
point
mean,
is
we
change, right? The point is how do we disrupt what's happening now? And I couldn't disrupt the pain, but I could disrupt the conditions in which I was having the pain, the context in which this was happening, and that made it less boring, and I just built worlds. It was like,
yeah,
that's what's
I'm
in.
curious because you've said it on here and you've said it to me a couple times, and I'm done chasing treatments, right? I'm closed. Is there a small piece of you that still has an eye on the horizon? Like, is part of it hope? Is it part of it science evolves and, something could happen? Or is it really, I got to close that door in order to move forward?
There's a shred, and I can close the door mostly. But yeah, I mean, that's why I still check the pharma pipelines from time to time just
Yeah.
to see if anybody's working on this. I mean, yeah, if someone came out and someone I trusted, if my neurologist said there's this clinical trial, for example, and they're trying this new medicine and this new medication and it seems to be doing well, because I trust her, I would do it. So the door's not closed, but it's closed, it's not locked. How's that?
It's hard. We're humans, right?
It's hard
Human,
to let go of hope entirely,
right.
but
It's
I'm more comfortable with where I am now, which is I'm not checking the pharma pipelines. I am not looking at all of those websites that I mentioned earlier constantly to see what anybody's doing. I have to build my life is going down a different lane.
Yeah. In part of that acceptance, right? It is acceptance, and that's a huge part of moving forward. Um, and then you've got the therapy coping mechanisms, but are there other just kind of built-in behaviors that you've created as safeguards around you and your injury of, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to sleep on a problem. Are there just things that you've now built in, your post TBI
Yes.
world, how you need to operate?
Well, one of them is I need to sleep on everything. I can't make decisions quickly. My brain does not react to information in the moment. And processing is slower and processing is different. And so I know now what I didn't know 2 years ago and 3 years ago, which is that I have to give myself the time before making a decision, before reacting to something new. Um, there are things I've said in other videos that are totally true. Unpredictability is a nightmare. I mean, one of the all the things that I used to hate in life, predictability, habit, routine, I loathe these things. I built my entire life around not having to have those things, and now I need all of those things. I need them the way bear needs routine, I need routine. And then there are, like, the things that I actually do. So, like, working out is huge. Working out has a huge part to play in helping me govern my mood and emotions. So the working out has to happen. Baking, I bake at least once a week, usually more often. I didn't lose my skills, and that feeling, that is something that actually that really, really helps. Playing guitar helps. They help in different ways, um, but it's but it also changes. The things I need now aren't the things I needed 6 months ago, and, like, that is one of the things that's unsettling about it. There's so much that's unsettling about a TBI, but one thing that's unsettling about a TBI is how unsettled the symptoms turn out to be. And you develop new symptoms, and you're like, "Wait, I was just getting used to these regular symptoms, and the TBI is like, hold my beer." So you have to constantly be able to adjust with a brain that doesn't adjust well. But time, talking things through, which I always did, but not to this degree. Like, if I'm thinking something through, I have to talk it through. It has to be out loud. I'll talk to you about it. I'll talk to Nick about it. But I need to talk to people I trust to make sure that my thinking is clear because I can't always trust it. It's not as reliable as it used to be.
Which isn't a bad thing. That's connection too, right?
Not a bad thing. Not everything is bad, but everything requires an adjustment.
Well, and I think, probably before a lot of those you would talk to other people, but it was probably a little bit more confirmation
It
bias.
was totally confirmation bias, except for you. With you, I actually care. I really cared, and if you had a contrary opinion, I wanted to hear it, but now I really need to hear it.
Now you need a little bit of the perspective to help round you out.
Well, and part of the reason why is and we were talking about this earlier in another conversation, is I'm not an angry person. Anger has never been an emotion that's close to me. I have a very long fuse. That is not true anymore. My first reaction to anything new or difficult is rage. I'm not used to feeling rage, but everything I'm feeling, like, funnels through rage, and I don't let it. I mean, I have to let time go by for the rage to get down so that I can figure out how I really feel and how I really think, because the anger takes over now. It's like I'm like white hot, and it's like, where did this come from?
Biology, survival.
Yeah, yeah, but it's part time and it's part recognizing what my brain can and cannot do.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple more questions to bring us home. One, we've touched on Best Guess to Stand as the world that you started to create for yourself. But now, as you're looking back on that, do you think there are things that the real world of treatment and therapies needs to take from the world you've created?
I do, and I think part of that comes with expectation. I think the idea that I thought I had this endless runway and just, like, arcades full of, like, potential treatments, I think there needs to be more reality baked into those recommendations, which is this could help. Just like I think we actually need to lower expectations of what these things are going to do. Because again, like, we know it's like 70 to 90% of people with concussions heal in 10 to 14 days. So those people are healing without any intervention. And the rest of the people are in situations like mine. And if you're in a situation like mine where you have prior conditions like prior concussions, history of migraine, making you more susceptible to this, it's likelier that you will have this problem. And I think a little less of a rosy glow on the treatments would have been helpful. Just keeping your this is, keeping your expectation, and whether or not the medical establishment does that, I think for people going through this, it's helpful to know that yes, it might help, but you have to be kind of prepared for what happens if it doesn't, and don't let that take, like, all of your spirit away. Like, it's just the nature of the thing. It doesn't you have not failed. And that's the other problem. Like, the language is always, "You failed the drug," right? That's what they say in medicine. "You failed the treatment. You failed the drug." And even though that's specific it means a specific thing, it also signifies something else, which is that there is an expectation that people will heal on a certain schedule. So, yeah, I think there are things in the real world that could be improved, and more research in the right places.
Well, we've kind of come to the conclusion of our journey here. We've talked about treatments, we've talked about trust, we've talked about therapies. Is there anything that you want to make sure that people in any of the phases, like,
I would strongly recommend to everybody that if it's in any way possible, find a neurologist. They're in short supply. I know that's a problem everywhere. If people live near a major medical center, they have access to one, it can be hard and, you can have a really long wait. I had a really long wait. I know people had longer, but it's worth trying because what a neurologist can see and do is different than what primary care is, especially if it's a neurologist who's up on the data and the research. And look, I wish there were communities beyond besides the Reddit TBI place where people could come together and talk about this. Um, but I yeah, I think it's about expectations. I think it's about reality,
yeah.
and I think it's about people. I mean, my message to everybody going through it is give yourself grace, give yourself permission. The people who are wondering why you haven't gotten better sooner don't understand what's going on. I think there's a lot of education that could be done also, not just the people who are going through this, but the people who are in their orbit, the caregivers, the family members, because a lot of the stories around that are really, really heartbreaking about how people's families peel away. I think more education about the condition for people who are in the orbit of people who have TBIs would be really helpful. So get to a neurologist, get your family some education, um, and I would start there.
Okay. Then the last question, what's your ratio today of trust?
90% me, 10% medicine. So it's completely flipped.
Okay.
That's better. That actually feels really good.
I think that's the perfect place to end this. So thank you for taking people through the journey.
And thank you for asking such great questions as always and being my forever friend and strategy partner.
You got it.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Rupture, the world of Besgesistan. Today's episode featured Kim Lauersdorf talking about who do you trust after a TBI. If this episode resonated with you, or you know someone who could benefit from it, please consider sharing it with them so they may find our community. And to support our work, you can like, share, subscribe, comment, or join us at bestguessistan.com, where we would love to hear about your rupture or your system's failure. We're waiting for your stories. Thank you.